Okay, good evening. Mo'adim l'simcha, everybody.
Thank you.
So we're coming up to Shabbat Chol HaMoed, and then following Shabbat Chol HaMoed, Sunday night is Hoshana Rabbah. Talk a little bit about Hoshana Rabbah now because we aren't going to have another opportunity in this forum. Probably one of the most underrated days on the Jewish calendar, although it's gained a little bit of popularity in recent years, and that is the day of Hoshana Rabbah, which is the last day of Sukkot, just before we get to Shmini Atzeret. So let's talk a little bit about some of the minhagim and the practices and the meaning of what this day is. Hoshana Rabbah is unique. That is the day that combines both elements of the Yamim Noraim, the aspects of the judgment and the din. There's the Sukkot, which is Man Simchateinu, and we have Halal, we have Simcha, etc. It's the day really that is a day of opposites and paradox, but contains both of those elements. If one of those trivia questions, what's the only time when we say Halal wearing a kittel? The answer is on Hoshana Rabbah. That's when you have both of those elements. So what is it all about? So I'll read again using Pnei Lachar of Melamed as a basis, as a springboard for our discussion. So he writes as follows. He says, Shvi'i shel Chag HaSukkot nikra Hoshana Rabbah, v'zot mishum shebachag HaSukkot nidonin al ha'mayim. One of the things the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah tells us, there are 4 days. We discussed this before Rosh Hashanah, right? There are 4 occasions on which the world is judged, and one of those is Sukkot. Sukkot were judged over water. The sealing of the judgment is on the last day of Sukkot. So that's the sealing of the judgment over water. We know how significant water is in our lives, both in terms of for plants and for animals and for human beings. Nothing can survive without water. And therefore, Mabim B'tchinot Hoshana al Hashem. Right, the word Hoshana Rabbah means Hoshana, right? Save us now, please, right? That is what where the name comes from. Yeah. There you go. So those of you who like gematras as well, that's correct. Right, Na is 51 in gematria, and that's going from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Elul until now. We have 51 days. Okay. We take, it's very interesting, of all the Arba Minim, right? You think there's a lot that we could say about this, but you think the most significant, the one that, let's say, people spend the most time on and the most money on, certainly is an etrog, right? Of all the minim, and the etrog is the one that has tam, bareach, and has the taste and smell, and has everything. By the way, I heard a funny story a couple of days ago. Somebody said, I won't say who it was, but there was a certain Rav. He said he was once at a Sukkot program in a hotel, and there were actually 2 different programs taking place at the same time. One was of a group that was a more Haredi group, and the other one was a more modern Orthodox group. Okay, and they each had their different speakers, and he was on one of the groups, and he went and he heard one of the speakers who had been invited independently to speak to both groups. So when he was talking to the first group, he gave them a drasha about the etrog. And he said how important, the etrog is one of the Arba Minim, but it stays by itself, it stays separate, and it has all its qualities, and it's so important to be who you are, and to stay separate, and keep it. And the next day, he had the same speaker, went to the other group, and he's saying the Arba Minim, and the etrog, even though all it's got, it only counts when it comes together, and you have to be together with everybody. He wanted to bring that as an example of what a great speaker this person was. I had other thoughts about it. But anyway, be that as it may, the fact is the choicest one of the Arba Minim, we look at the etrog, right? That's the one that nobody spends any time looking at is the Arava. The Arava has nothing, it has no taste, it has no smell, it's got, right? If you're lucky, the Arava gets through, 1 day, 2 days of Sukkot before it starts wilting away. Somebody already came up to me one of the days of Chol HaMoed before Shachrit, said, is this Arava kosher? We have to switch our Aravot 2, 3 times throughout the Chag. But the Arava, that is the one that gets singled out. That is the one that has its special moment, the only one of the Arba Minim that has its own mitzvah by itself. Very, very interesting. That is the Arava, and that is comes to the fore on Hoshana Rabbah. We can maybe talk about, maybe think about why that is. But in any event, so he says, Lochim b'yom ze Aravot, ibnei shel Aravot niskakot lamayim yoter mikol. The Arava, right, it may not have anything, but what it does have more than everything else is that it has thirst. It needs water. You separate. It's called arvei nachal. You take it away from water just for a few moments, a few hours, a few days, and already it's dying. So if this is the day where we want to emphasize how important and we need water and we want to pray for it, we want to cry out for it, so we use the Aravah. That's one reason. You can tell when it becomes dry very quickly. והקפידו חכמים שלא יחול הושנה רבה בשבת כדי שיוכלו להתחנן ולזעוק על המים. When you cry out and pray for the rain, the Rokach explains that's the reason why Hoshana Rabbah will not fall out on Shabbat. Our calendar is set up in such a way. That's why the way we remember Lo Adu Rosh, that Chazal tell us Lo Adu Rosh means Aleph, Dalet, Vav, that those are the days of the week on which Rosh Hashanah will not fall out. That's how the calendar was arranged in such a way. The reason for that is we don't want Yom Kippur to fall out the day before Shabbat or the day after Shabbat. We don't want Yom Kippur to be attached to Shabbat. And we also don't want Hoshana Rabbah to fall out on Shabbat. So again, that just gives you a sense. You think about the way the calendar was arranged. Yom Kippur, we understand Hoshana Rabbah can't be on Shabbat. It's a very, very significant day. כשהם שמיים מקיימים את החיים בעולם הזה, כחמיים הרוחניים שהם התורה מקיימים את חיי הרוח. Okay, so water does not just mean water in the literal sense, also means in a spiritual sense water. Chazal tell us, ein mayim ela Torah. Water represents Torah. The same way we can't live without water, we can't live without Torah. And therefore, יוצא שהדין על המים כולל בתוכו דין על כל חיי האדם הגשמיים והרוחניים. There is something about this judgment. There's an element here of judgment on water, not just literally water, but also something deeper in our spiritual lives as well. וזהו שאמרו חכמים ששלושה מועדים ישנם לדין, הראשון בראש השנה, השני ביום כיפור, והשלישי בהושענא רבה. Okay, so this is in the Zohar, which really connects that we have Rosh Hashanah, and we have is the right inscription, right? Yom Kippur, it's sealed, but there's still another chance. It's still, in a certain sense, there's something that's left open until Hoshana Rabbah. And the mashal that's given, he quotes here, and this is why, what do we wish people on Hoshana Rabbah? You say pit katafa, right, or a good kvitel, in English. So what does that mean? It says, אף שגזר הדין נחתם ביום הכיפורים, ההוראה להוצאת הדין אל הפועל ניתנת בהושענא רבה. Obviously, all of this is talking in mashal. It's all talking in analogies. But the analogy is that the judgment is sealed on Yom Kippur, but the execution, right, the note which has what the judgment is, that's only given over on Hoshana Rabbah. משל לבית דין שכבר קיבל החלטה, וכל זמן שגזר הדין עדיין לא נכתב על שטר וניתן ביד השליחים שיוצאים להביאו, עוד אפשר לפעול כדי לשנותו לטובה. So even though the judgment has been made, it hasn't yet, the verdict has not been passed over, that note, that pitka, that kvitel, so to speak, has not been given over to be executed. Now, I've thought for a long time, why does it have to be this way? We always say, Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, v'yom tzom kippur yachatemun. What? So now we all of a sudden, what's the shtick? It's sealed on Yom Kippur. You've had Ne'ilah. Now you have Hoshana Rabbah. The judgment was finished, or the judgment wasn't finished. It's right. What is it? So maybe the idea is this. The idea is, we all know Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is a time which is not normal. This whole month is not normal. In fact, no time is normal. But that is a time. It's a very, very intense period. And we try to be our best, and we add in slichot, and we do all sorts of things that we don't normally do. Right? And this has a halachic expression as well. It's very strange. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch that right, somebody who normally relies on pat akum, for example, right, bread which is baked by non-Jews, which is kosher, has kosher ingredients, but it's what's called pat akum. So there are certain conditions and places and communities and practices that allow that to be consumed. But during the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, it says you should not. Somebody who has the practice of eating panakum should not eat it during that time. Everybody asks, what's the, if this is something, if it's a chumrah that you're meant to take on, you should take it on. If it's a chumrah you don't need to take on, you don't need to take it on. Why is it during these 10 days we do things differently? So we all know during the 10 days, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, we're on our best behavior. Hoshana Rabbah used to say, she said she came home once and she told her father, they taught us in school that you have to be very, very well behaved between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And her father said, that's true, but you should know that you also need to be very well behaved from Yom Kippur until Rosh Hashanah. But it's a time that we do things differently because we know that judgment is there. Okay. So if we were to say the judgment continues, it starts off for Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, and then on Yom Tzom Kippur something else, and then on Hoshana Rabbah yechatemun, okay? So then the whole period would be, first of all, it would be very difficult to handle. But that's the whole time when you're acting abnormally. Part of the judgment is not just when you know that someone's looking, not just when you know that you need to be on your best behavior, but how do you act normally? What's your normal way, right? All those things that we say, we're going to take on extra, we're going to do this, we're going to behave in ways that we don't normally behave. So that's all very good and that's all very nice. But at the end of the day, the judgment of how we're going to be seen and how we're going to be viewed depends on what we do in normal times as well. So I think maybe that's the concept behind Hoshana Rabbah. That we had Rosh Hashanah, we had Yom Kippur, then we go back to normal, so to speak. As I say, normal is always a relative term. But we go back to normal, we go back to some sort of routine. We're not trying extra hard because we know we're being judged. We're just acting normally. And then comes Hoshana Rabbah. And then we say, okay, now here's the real sealing of the judgment, meaning all those things that you said you're going to improve and you said you're going to try harder. We said we're going to behave in a certain way. Is that how you behave? Under normal conditions, let's go back and let's evaluate that and let's seal the judgment as it is. So that I think is what's part of what's behind this idea. So he writes here that therefore, it is proper to engage in tshuva on the day of Hoshana Rabbah as well. Okay, there are those who have a great simcha on the night of Hoshana Rabbah, like the other nights of Sukkot. However, the more common minhag is that Hoshana Rabbah is dedicated to learning Torah. There are those that will stay up. This has become very popular in recent years. There are those that will stay up the entire night learning Torah. But even if you're not staying up the entire night, there is obviously value in dedicating some hours on the night for studying. And of course, we here at Rabbi Kenigsberg will not be left out. And we have a program here on Sunday night starting at, I think, 8 o'clock. And everybody's invited to come here and join and to learn a little bit on this very, very significant day. Okay. And then, of course, the davening as well reflects this idea. We add in extra parts in Pesukei Zimra when it comes to Hoshana Rabbah. It has a bit of a Yom Tov feel to it as well, sort of a quasi Yom Tov feel. And then we have the as we mentioned already, the special mitzvah, aside from the Arba Minim, but we have the special mitzvah of the Aravot as well. So right, every day, we know we do Hoshanot, every day of Sukkot, we have one circuit around the bima. Hopefully we start on one side and we get back there by the end. We don't get stuck in the middle. But we go around once. We have a few tefillot that we say before and after. But Yom Hoshana Rabbah, this is where the name comes from as well. We go around not just once, but we go around 7 times. And we say lots of tefillot after each of the 7 הקפות. ובני קדושתו ומצוותו מיוחדת של היום נוהגים לעשות ביום השנה רבה סעודה חשובה. There's also a minhag, because there's a special nature and a special sanctity to this day, to have a seudah as well. Aside from the fact that it's the last time and it's the last opportunity to really have the seudah in the sukkah. And I'll just mention on that as well. There is a minhag that many people have a farewell to the sukkah, a preda, just before the end of Yom Tov, and we'll be doing that here as well. So if you come a little bit early, I know that sounds very, very strange, right? Coming on a Yom Tov for mincha and Erev Yom Tov afternoon, to come early. But come early, at 5:20, there'll be a farewell to the sukkah here, or the shul sukkah as well, before we get to mincha, and then Shmini Atzeret, and Simchat Torah, and all the rest of it. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu לזרוק אותי לישראל, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, שניהם אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידעו.